Howdy again everyone, and let's get stuck right into reviewing the living daylights out of Nikon's brand new 24-70mm f2.8 S Mark II. It's only for their Z mount mirrorless cameras, full frame or aps-c, and it's obviously aimed at professionals and affluent amateurs only, as it's priced at $2,800 or £2,600 here in the UK. But having said that, professional video makers might be interested too. More on that in a minute. I'd like to thank Nikon UK for loaning me this lens for a couple of weeks for testing, although as usual this is a totally independent review and they've had no input into the video. Everyone loves a fast standard zoom lens, and part of the reason they're so expensive is that they're actually very difficult for manufacturers to design. Well, not so much difficult to design, rather difficult to design really well. Any professional shooter who values quick flexibility, such as wedding and event photographers and photojournalists, will often go for a zoom lens like this, rather than a set of prime lenses for the simple convenience and quickness, and f2.8 is still bright enough to get out of focus backgrounds and faster shutter speeds in darker situations. Nikon's original Z 24-70 f2.8 is somewhat legendary, a ridiculously sharp lens with beautiful build quality and a neat little screen on top as well. This new version of the lens costs a few $100s more and has some interesting design changes and improvements that a number of particular users might really appreciate, and I'll give you those now. Firstly, the lens is the lightest professional fast standard zoom lens I've ever handled, at only 675 grams or 1.5 pounds. That's a good 150 grams lighter than its predecessor, making it a bit easier to carry around with you all day. Anyone who's spent hours actually shooting a wedding before will know how helpful that could be. Secondly, it's the world's first 24-70 f2.8 with internal zooming. Some people won't see the big deal, but this is actually a nice design feature. Not only does that make the lens better weather sealed and more able to resist sucking in dust particles over time, but also it's helpful for video makers using this thing on an electronic gimbal. You can zoom in and out without affecting the lens's balance so much. Something else video makers might want to take note of is that this lens has almost no visible focus breathing, which is another nice improvement over the original model. Here you can see that whether you're zoomed in or zoomed out, any kind of zooming when changing focus is highly suppressed, which is unusual to see on a lens of this kind. Nice. Another new feature for video makers is that this is the first Nikon lens where you can set its customizable control ring, often used for aperture control, to either click or to turn smoothly. Great! That is useful for video makers who want the possibility of making smooth aperture changes, and setting it to click can be helpful too, as it helps prevent you accidentally turning that control ring, a complaint I've always had about other Nikon Z mount lenses. And the final improvement, faster and more confident autofocus. The original lens was no slouch in this department, but even on my older Nikon Z7 camera, I did notice a nice difference here, with the new one being fantastically quick, accurate and silent in use. So there are lots of nice improvements to the lens's build quality here that still shooters will like, but video makers will particularly love, and this is representative of Nikon's ambitions to really move into the video market alongside their recent acquisition of Red. Everything else about the lens's build quality is as excellent as you'd expect, although in order to keep the weight down, they have relied on the use of plastic quite a bit, although there's also a little metal in the construction here and there, alongside plenty of weather sealing. On the side we get switches for auto manual focus and a focus limiter switch too, to set the lens to only focus past 33 centimeters. Unless you're trying to get some macro shots, you might just leave that on, but it won't really make a big difference to your autofocus speeds. We also get a couple of customizable function buttons before we reach the rubberized zoom ring. It turns quite smoothly and evenly, but with just a slight stickiness to it, so getting extra slow, gentle zoom actions will be hard here for video makers. In front of that, we get the rubberized manual focus ring, which turns fantastically smoothly and works very responsively. The lens has a 77mm front filter thread, comes with a decent quality lockable lens hood. It does not feature its own image stabilization though. Most Nikon cameras nowadays have this built in, but that's something to be aware of if your camera doesn't. Slightly disappointing in my opinion actually, considering the lens's very high price. Apart from that though, this lens's build quality is wonderful. I like its lighter weight and lightning fast autofocus, and video makers in particular will love its design choices and features as well. So, image quality. I'm testing it today on my Nikon Z7 with its 45MP full frame sensor. In-camera corrections are turned on for this test. If you're wondering why the test chart looks slightly different today, it's because for various reasons I had to shoot it in bright sunshine this time. Alright, at 24mm and f2.8 we get pretty much razor sharpness and excellent contrast right away in the middle of the image. Let's have a look in the corners then. They're looking very slightly softer but still really nice. f4 sees some extra brightness and clarity. The lens stays this sharp down to f8. Stop down to f11 or darker and diffraction starts to kick in, robbing us of a little resolution. Let's zoom in about halfway to 40mm now. At f2.8, sharpness is still fantastic in the middle, but stop down to f4 for a tiny extra edge of resolution. Anyway, let's open back up to f2.8 and look over in the corners again. Again, image quality is a little softer here, but still very good. At f4 and f5.6, we see little improvements that lead to basically perfect sharpness and contrast. Okay, finally, let's zoom all the way into 70mm. At f2.8 we get basically the same situation as at 40mm, great sharpness and contrast at f2.8, but stop down to f4 if you want to see perfection there in the middle. Let's open back up to f2.8 and look over in the image corners. Again, like before, slightly softer than the middle, but still very good. f4 and f5.6 again see gradual improvements which lead to brilliant quality from corner to corner, and again the lens stays this sharp down to f8. Overall, this new 24-70 offers a nice even performance with plenty of sharpness and contrast to be seen. It doesn't seem to be any sharper than Nikon's original 24-70 f2.8 if truth be told, and you'll still get slightly sharper results from prime lenses. Still though, for a fast standard zoom optic, this is great image quality. Let's turn off in-camera corrections and take a look at distortion and vignetting. At 24mm we see moderately strong barrel distortion and very dark corners at f2.8. The corners gradually get brighter at f4 and f5.6. Zoom into 32mm and that distortion straightens out, and at 70mm it flips into a pincushion pattern. Vignetting is still quite a problem at f2.8 too, with the same gradual improvements at f4 and f5.6. So that's about the same performance as the original lens, perhaps just a tiny improvement. Next, close-up image quality, and when you're zoomed in, the lens can shoot as closely as 33cm to your subject, even closer when you're zoomed out. At f2.8, close-up image quality is pretty hazy, which is actually worse than the performance of the original lens. However, all you have to do is stop down to f4 and picture quality quickly becomes amazing again. So if you're shooting up close, stop down, at least just a little. When it comes to working against bright lights, the lens offers a fantastic performance here whether you're zoomed out or zoomed in. Contrast remains high and flaring is mostly under control, and that is quite a considerable improvement over the original version of the lens. While we're working in the dark, let's take a look for coma and sun stars. Any kind of coma smearing on bright points of light is virtually non-existent here. Stop down to f4 or f5.6 and those lights get just a touch more definition to them. Let's zoom out and look for sun stars. They're beginning to emerge at only f8. At f11, f16 and f22 they gradually get bigger. Next, bokeh. Nikon's previous 24-70mm f2.8 gave nice out-of-focus backgrounds, but they could sometimes have just a slight edge to them in difficult areas. I wasn't able to provoke that in my tests with this new lens though. Its out-of-focus backgrounds look essentially gorgeous no matter what you're shooting, so that's another small improvement. And finally, longitudinal chromatic aberration. It's actually not too bad on this lens at f2.8, but it's still there at f4 and even f5.6. Stop down to f8 though, and it's finally mostly cleared up. Overall, well, you've seen the test results yourself. Even though I was hoping for perhaps just a touch of extra sharpness out of it, I didn't really notice any improvement over its fantastic predecessor in that respect. The lens's image quality is still excellent, and it does have better work against bright lights and marginally smoother looking bokeh. The improvements here are all really in the lens's build quality and design though. It's far better optimized for professional video work, lighter weight, with amazing autofocus, and I personally know at least a few serious photographers who will really appreciate the internal zoom design. The lens is terribly expensive of course, and I was also disappointed not to see optical image stabilization at this kind of price. Nevertheless, it's still fantastic overall, and it comes recommended if you're a pro with some real money behind you. Thanks for watching everyone, and as usual, a huge thanks to my supporters on Patreon and channel members who help to keep these sponsorship-free videos coming. Links in the description below.